Human fleet dominates the Warzone. Destroys the enemy in seconds, HFY sci-fi story. The distant hum of the human fleet's engines filled the void of space as Commander Raylan Briggs stood on the bridge of the USS Valor, his eyes fixed on the massive holographic display before him. The Warzone stretched endlessly across the screen, a cacophony of flashing red and green as ships from both sides engaged in a violent, chaotic battle. The enemy, a technologically advanced alien race known as the Xylan, had underestimated humanity. They thought their superior firepower and endless numbers could overwhelm the human fleet. They thought the sheer size of their armada would crush the will of Earth's finest. They were wrong. Enemy fleet in position, reported Lieutenant Weaver from the tactical station. They're deploying heavy artillery in a concentrated volley, targeting our lead ships. Commander Briggs didn't flinch. He had anticipated this move. The Xylan were predictable, relying on brute force and overwhelming numbers. Humanity had something far more powerful: ingenuity, adaptability, and the will to survive. Deploy the Phantom Array, Briggs ordered, his voice steady. Prepare all interceptors for immediate launch. Give them hell. The crew moved with precision, their hands a blur as they carried out their orders. On the screens, dozens of sleek, agile human ships powered up their engines and swarmed the battlefield like a flock of birds, darting in and out of enemy fire with ease. Each human fighter was a precise instrument of destruction, taking advantage of every weakness in the Xylan's formations. As the first wave of Xylan artillery rained down, the USS Valor released its secret weapon, the Phantom Array, an advanced cloaking technology that allowed human ships to vanish from sight, only to reappear at their enemy's weakest point. The Xylan fleet found themselves firing into empty space, their shots harmlessly passing through the void. Before they could reposition, the human fleet struck. The interceptors, now fully cloaked, reappeared in the Xylan fleet's heart, cutting through their formations like a blade through silk. Each ship's advanced AI calculated the most efficient attack routes, targeting the vital systems of their enemies with pinpoint accuracy. The Xylan ships began to explode in quick succession. Their shields flickered out as human precision weapons disabled their engines and weapon systems. It was a sight that would have left any other race in shock and awe. But for the humans, this was nothing new. The battle tactics, honed through years of conflict, were second nature. We've crippled their outer defenses, Weaver reported, a note of satisfaction in her voice. They're falling apart. Activate the Omega cannon, Briggs said, his tone colder now. The battle was almost over, but it was time to end it decisively. The USS Valor's flagship weapon, a massive energy cannon capable of annihilating entire fleets, charged up, its power surging as the final enemy ships struggled to regroup. In the span of mere seconds, the Omega cannon fired, sending a blinding beam of energy across the Warzone. The Xylan fleet, already reeling from the loss of their firepower and coordination, had no chance. The beam struck their command ship first, vaporizing it in an instant. The remaining enemy ships scattered, but it was too late. The remaining Xylan forces were decimated within moments. What had been a massive, coordinated war effort just minutes before now resembled a field of broken wreckage and dead ships. Briggs stood tall, his eyes narrowing with cold satisfaction. Humanity had done what they always did, turn the tide when all seemed lost. Against all odds, the human fleet had dominated the Warzone and obliterated the enemy in seconds. Mission accomplished, Briggs said, turning away from the screen. Weaver gave him a brief nod, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. We've sent them a message, sir. We've sent them more than that, Briggs replied, his eyes scanning the remnants of the battle. We've shown them what happens when they underestimate the human spirit. The USS Valor glided through the debris, its crew proud, their victory another testament to the resilience of humanity. In the vast expanse of space, it was a message that would echo for eons: never underestimate the humans. And as the fleet sailed back toward Earth, Commander Raylan Briggs couldn't help but feel the weight of history on his shoulders. It wasn't just another battle won. It was a testament to the future humanity was carving across the stars.
As the USS Valor made its way back to Earth, Commander Raylan Briggs allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The view from the observation deck offered an endless vista of stars stretching beyond the horizon. In the distance, the remains of the Xylan fleet floated, a grim reminder of the destruction that had unfolded in such a short time. "That was too easy," Lieutenant Weaver remarked as she stepped beside Briggs, her voice tinged with both satisfaction and concern. "I thought they'd put up more of a fight." Briggs smirked, his gaze still fixed on the stars. "The Xylan underestimated us. They thought their technology, their sheer numbers, would be enough to crush us. They didn't factor in our greatest strength, our ability to adapt and overcome." "True," Weaver agreed, "but we can't let our guard down. They'll regroup, and there are more enemies out there. The universe is vast." "Indeed," Briggs replied, turning to face her, "but that's what makes humanity dangerous. We learn from every battle, we grow stronger." Just then, a transmission pinged through from Fleet Command. The voice of Admiral Clark crackled over the comms. "Commander Briggs, report." "Mission complete, Admiral," Briggs responded. "The Xylan fleet has been obliterated, their forces are in disarray, and the remaining ships are either disabled or fleeing. No further resistance expected." There was a brief pause, followed by Clark's voice. "Excellent work, Commander, but this victory isn't just about winning a battle, it's a declaration. You've sent a message to every other species in the galaxy. Humanity is not to be trifled with. They'll be talking about this for decades." Briggs nodded, his mind already shifting toward the future. "We can't rest on our laurels. The Xylan were the first, but they won't be the last. We need to stay ahead of the curve." "Agreed," Clark replied. "Stay vigilant, Commander, and prepare for the next phase of humanity's expansion. We're going beyond just defending ourselves. We're staking our claim on the stars." As the transmission ended, Briggs looked to the horizon again. He could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The victory today was sweet, but it was only the beginning. Humanity had proven its might in the Warzone, but the galaxy was vast, full of unknown threats and opportunities. If the Xylan had learned anything from this confrontation, it was that humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore, they were fighting to dominate. And dominate they would. Months later, the human fleet was a name spoken with fear and respect across the galaxy. The Xylan, once a formidable force, were now a shadow of their former selves, their empire fractured, their ambitions stifled. The humans had delivered a crushing blow, and the universe would never be the same. The human fleet's strategy was not just about brute force, it was about surgical strikes, precision, and intelligence. Every conflict, every war was an opportunity to evolve, to refine their tactics. With every victory, their reputation grew, their technology advanced, and their resolve hardened. Briggs and his crew were ready for whatever would come next. They had proven that humanity was no longer a fledgling species on the fringe of the galaxy, they were a rising power that would shape the future, and no one could stand in their way. As the USS Valor soared through the stars once more, the ship's AI sent out a simple message to the galaxy, encrypted and broadcasted across every known channel. "Humanity has arrived, and we are here to stay."
The message reverberated through the cosmos like a thunderclap. Even in the distant reaches of space, where communication took time to travel, the words echoed with an unmistakable weight. Some species ignored it, dismissing the humans as yet another species trying to make a name for themselves. But for those who were wiser, those who had been watching humanity's rise with cautious eyes, it was clear that things had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. It didn't take long for humanity to prove that their victory against the Xylan wasn't a fluke. They expanded their fleet, building on the technological edge they had gained from their enemies. Alien designs were studied, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. The human fleet grew, not just in size, but in sophistication. They were no longer mere conquerors, they were innovators, masters of both warfare and diplomacy, forging alliances and carving out influence across the stars. Back on Earth, leaders convened in secret. The victory was celebrated. Yes, but there were no illusions about the future. The Xylan might have been crushed, but they were only one of many species in the galaxy, each with its own ambitions. The true test of humanity's place in the universe had only just begun. Commander Raylan Briggs sat at a darkened table within the High Command Center aboard the USS Valor, surrounded by high-ranking officials and strategists. A star chart filled the holotable, showing humanity's rapidly expanding influence. They had claimed a few star systems, but Briggs knew they were only scratching the surface. The galaxy was vast, and not all its inhabitants would welcome humanity's rise. "Admiral Clark," Briggs began, We've been waiting for the Xylan retaliation, but they're fractured. Their warlords are too busy fighting each other. We can't afford to let that lull us into complacency. Admiral Clark, now a seasoned leader, nodded. True, the Xylan are weak, but we've made enemies. The Tzkarn, the Vatari, and the Dralik. They're watching us. They're waiting for us to make a mistake. Briggs leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the table. The galaxy's fractured, but it's becoming clear that some factions are uniting against us. We need to keep the initiative. We need to show that we aren't just another empire. They need to understand that we will not be intimidated. We'll set the tone. You're suggesting a show of force? Lieutenant Weaver, now promoted to Fleet Intelligence, asked with a raised eyebrow. Not just force, Briggs said with a glint in his eye. A message. We'll hit them where they least expect it. A week later, the USS Valor and a fleet of 50 advanced warships emerged from hyperspace just outside the Tzkarn sector, a long-standing power in the galactic region. The Tzkarn were known for their brutal militaristic society, and their commanders were ruthless, yet they had always been cautious about picking a fight with the growing human empire. Briggs had a different plan. Without warning, the human fleet launched a series of simultaneous strikes on strategic Tzkarn outposts, nothing that could cripple their economy, but enough to send a message. They disabled weapons caches, took out vital communication hubs, and struck their military bases with precision. The attacks were surgical, quick, and devastating. Before the Tzkarn could respond, the human fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving nothing behind but chaos and confusion. It wasn't a full-scale invasion. It was an assertion of dominance, an assertion that said we can strike whenever we choose, and you cannot stop us. By the time the Tzkarn realized what had happened, their ships were already scrambling to secure their systems. But it was too late. The human fleet had already retreated, leaving only their reputation to linger. They hadn't just destroyed the Tzkarn. They had forced them to reckon with humanity's reach and willingness to act decisively. 2 days later, Briggs stood on the bridge of the USS Valor, watching as the Tzkarn sent out a message, hoping to de-escalate the situation. It was a plea for diplomacy, a sign that they had learned the lesson of the Xylan. But it was clear the galaxy was changing, and humanity had become the center of that change. Send our response, Briggs ordered. Tell them that we're not here to make enemies, but we won't hesitate to defend what's ours. If they want peace, they can have it, but they have to respect us. Weaver, standing nearby, pressed a few keys on the console. Message sent, Commander. Good, Briggs said, his gaze never leaving the starfield outside. This isn't just about fighting wars. It's about establishing dominance, showing them that humanity doesn't bend to anyone. The ripple effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, every faction, every species that had thought of challenging the humans reconsidered. The Tzkarn were not the first to feel the sting of humanity's military might, and they wouldn't be the last. Humanity had made its mark, and the galaxy would soon realize that they were no longer just a fledgling species, they were a force to be reckoned with. And for Raylan Briggs, the stakes were higher than ever. The Xylan had fallen, but other enemies lurked in the darkness of space. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about creating a new order, a human order, across the stars. As the USS Valor glided through the void, Briggs thought of the future. A future where humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And no one, no matter how powerful, would be able to stop them. The message had been sent, and the galaxy would never forget. Humanity had arrived, and we are here to conquer. As the months passed, the message that humanity was a force to be reckoned with spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Tzkarn, once proud and ruthless, now found themselves in diplomatic turmoil, forced to defend their territories and reconsider their stance toward humanity. And it wasn't just the Tzkarn who were watching. The Vatari, the Dralik, and several other alien factions had begun to take notice of the human fleet's swift and decisive actions. But with this newfound power came new challenges. On the USS Valor, Commander Raylan Briggs stood at the helm, his brow furrowed as he watched the galactic map unfold before him. The fleet had expanded, stretching further into unexplored systems, encountering new species, some welcoming, others hostile. But now, new threats were on the horizon, ones that humanity hadn't yet encountered. We've received new intelligence, Commander, Lieutenant Weaver said, walking over to Briggs, holding a datapad. The Dralek have been quietly assembling a coalition of smaller, aggressive species near the outer rim. They've made several movements toward our borders. They're testing us. Briggs didn't respond immediately. He knew the Dralek well. A cold, calculating species. They had always been opportunistic, and their reputation for alliances of convenience made them dangerous. This was no mere act of aggression, it was a warning. Are they preparing for a full-scale attack? Briggs asked. Not yet, Weaver replied, but they are positioning their fleet. They've started mining the outer planets and fortifying their borders. They're signaling to us, and they want to see how we respond. Briggs tapped his fingers on the console. The Dralek had been waiting for a moment of weakness. They thought humanity's rise to power had been a fluke. They were about to find out how wrong they were. We'll respond in kind, Briggs said, his voice sharp. Prepare the fleet. We'll pay them a visit. A week later, the USS Valor dropped out of hyperspace near the Dralek's outermost system. The fleet was in formation, a massive line of ships ready for whatever the Dralek had in store. The vast emptiness of space felt oppressive, but Briggs had no hesitation. The time for diplomacy had passed. The Dralek needed to learn that humanity was not to be tested. We've entered their space, Weaver reported from the tactical station. They haven't moved yet. Stay on high alert, Briggs ordered. No more games. Let's make our presence known. He gave the signal. With a sudden burst of acceleration, the human fleet moved forward, a silent storm of warships. The Dralek's outer defenses, scattered and unprepared for the precision of the human strike, were overwhelmed within minutes. Human ships darted in and out of enemy fire, their AI-enhanced pilots picking apart the Dralek's defensive lines. The Dralek fleet had mobilized, but they were slow, and their communication lines were already compromised. Before they could assemble a cohesive counterattack, the USS Valor's advanced weaponry, coupled with the unmatched precision of the fleet, struck first. The Omega cannon was fired once more, but this time, it was aimed at the heart of the Dralek's fortress, a massive shipyard facility they had been using to assemble new warships. The blast incinerated the facility in a single pulse, cutting off their ability to produce ships. The remaining Dralek ships scattered, but the damage had been done. Humanity had sent its message loud and clear. We've crippled their infrastructure, Lieutenant Weaver said, her eyes wide with surprise. They're retreating, but they won't be able to recover from this. Briggs nodded, watching the chaos unfold on the display screen. The Dralek had underestimated them, thinking their position on the outer rim was safe from human reprisal. They were wrong. The human fleet wasn't interested in petty territorial squabbles, it was interested in ensuring that no one threatened their path forward. As the fleet turned back toward human space, the victory was already being analyzed by the commanders back on Earth. Another message had been sent to the galaxy, but this time, it was even clearer. Humanity wasn't just a rising power, it was an unstoppable force, capable of destroying entire fleets and economies in a matter of moments. But while the Dralek had learned their lesson, something else lingered on Briggs' mind. A new faction had been watching from the shadows, a species that had once been a myth among the galactic community, the Zorith. The Zorith were ancient, powerful, and notoriously secretive. Their ships were said to be capable of manipulating space itself, and their warriors were feared across countless star systems. For centuries, the Zorith had stayed hidden, rarely engaging in direct conflict with other species. But Briggs had heard whispers. The Zorith had been monitoring the rise of humanity, and their silence spoke volumes. The galaxy's power balance was shifting, and they were waiting for the right moment to make their move. The Zorith are out there, Briggs murmured to himself as he stood on the bridge, staring out into the vastness of space. They've been watching us. Weaver walked up beside him. You think they'll be our next challenge? Briggs nodded slowly. I don't know, but we need to be ready for them. If they decide to act, we'll need to hit them harder and faster than anything we've faced before. The days turned into weeks, and the human fleet continued its patrols, keeping the peace with allies and intimidating those who might think of challenging them. But beneath the surface, tensions were growing. The galaxy's powerhouses, like the Dralek and the Vathari, were beginning to re-evaluate their strategies. Some would seek new alliances, others would bide their time, but none could ignore the rising tide that was humanity. And then, as predicted, the message from the Zorith came. A single transmission. No demands. No threats, just a symbol. A circle, with a jagged line cutting through it. An ancient insignia, one that spoke of an ancient rivalry. The Zorith were coming. Humanity had claimed its place in the galaxy, but now the true test would begin. The Zorith, with their unfathomable power, were about to make their move, and for the first time, Commander Raylan Briggs realized that victory wouldn't come easily. The galaxy was on the edge of a new war, and humanity was ready to fight. The USS Valor and its fleet sat in the quiet hum of space, but Commander Raylan Briggs knew that calm wouldn't last long. The Zorith had made their presence known, and it was only a matter of time before they moved. The jagged line across the symbol they'd sent was unmistakable, an ancient warning, a signal of conflict long before humanity had even set foot among the stars. Briggs couldn't ignore the implications. The Zorith weren't like the Xylan or the Dralic. They weren't just another aggressive species looking to expand their territory. They were a force, an ancient one, that had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had watched humanity's rise in silence. But now, their patience had run out. Commander, Lieutenant Weaver's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him back to the present. She was standing at the tactical station, staring intently at the holomap of the galaxy. The Zorith have just entered the Adari system. They've brought a full fleet. Briggs stepped toward her, scanning the display. The Zorith fleet was massive, larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. It wasn't just their numbers that made them a threat. It was their technology. Ships that could manipulate space. Beings who could bend time, if the rumors were true. Their fleet is already in motion, Weaver continued, a note of urgency in her voice. They've bypassed most of the neutral territories and are heading straight toward human-controlled space. We need to prepare for an encounter. Briggs clenched his jaw. We've never faced anything like this before. It's not just their ships, it's their entire civilization. They've never been interested in expansion. Why now? Maybe they've seen us as a threat, Weaver suggested, turning her gaze to him. Or maybe they've decided the galaxy has room for only one dominant species, and they don't want it to be us. Briggs nodded, his mind racing through their options. There was no diplomacy with the Zorith, they didn't negotiate. If humanity was going to survive, they had to strike first, but a direct attack seemed suicidal. Prepare the fleet, he said finally, his voice firm. We'll engage on our terms. No one underestimates humanity. The fleet assembled, the human warships locking into position just beyond the asteroid belt of the Adari system. The stars shimmered silently in the distance. The calm before the storm. The USS Valor stood at the forefront, its advanced systems humming as they readied for battle. We've got incoming, Lieutenant Weaver reported, her eyes scanning the tactical readout. The Zorith fleet is moving at incredible speed. They've dropped out of hyperspace and are closing in fast. Briggs steeled himself. He had prepared for this moment his entire career, but he had never faced anything like this. The Zorith were rumored to manipulate gravity itself, warp fields that made their ships seem to vanish into thin air, reappearing miles away in an instant. They were not just a threat in the physical sense, they were a psychological one as well. Their very presence could break the resolve of lesser species. Hold steady, Briggs said, his voice cutting through the tension. We'll fight smart, we'll fight together, and we will fight to win. Suddenly, a ripple in space caught his eye. A distortion appeared in the vastness of the stars, a shimmering distortion that grew rapidly, and then, without warning, the Zorith fleet materialized in front of them, 100 ships, sleek and formidable, their dark hulls shifting in a way that defied the laws of physics. Briggs' heart pounded in his chest. This was the moment. All ships, engage, he commanded, his voice steady despite the rising tide of adrenaline. The human fleet launched into action, fighter ships and warships darting forward, sending out waves of pulsefire and missile salvos. The Zorith responded with eerie calm, their ships disappearing into space as their distortions flickered. One moment they were there, the next, they were gone, reappearing miles away in an instant, their weapons cutting through human ships with pinpoint precision. We're being outmaneuvered, Weaver shouted. Their ships are bending space. We can't target them effectively. Stay on them, Briggs barked. We'll adapt. Their technology may be advanced, but they're not invincible. We know their weaknesses. The human fleet shifted its tactics, utilizing every trick and tool at their disposal. They used the distortion fields to their advantage, setting up traps, spreading out to confuse the Zorith. The human ships worked as one, as a singular entity, communicating in real time with the help of their advanced AI systems. It wasn't just about raw power, it was about precision, about anticipating every move the enemy made. And then, as if the Zorith had finally underestimated humanity, the USS Valor activated its secret weapon, the graviton pulse cannon. "We're ready," said Lieutenant Weaver, her eyes locking with Briggs. "On your mark." Briggs stood tall, his finger hovering over the command console. The USS Valor fired a single, concentrated pulse. The energy blast lanced out into the heart of the Zorith fleet, causing a massive disturbance in the fabric of space. The distortion fields that had protected their ships faltered for a brief, precious moment, leaving them vulnerable. One ship, then another, flickered out of existence, their engines overloaded by the sudden surge of energy. The Zorith fleet's advantage was gone. "Now," Briggs shouted. Human fighters swarmed the remaining Zorith ships, precision targeting their engines and weapon systems. The Zorith were fast, but their power was now diminished, and humanity had learned to fight in ways no one else had anticipated. In mere minutes, the battle began to turn. The Zorith, once so confident in their superiority, were reeling. They hadn't expected this kind of resistance, this ingenuity. Their ships, once impervious to attack, were now being destroyed, their fleets disintegrating before their eyes. The Zorith began to retreat, their once mighty warships disappearing into the void, their distortions faltering as they tried to escape. The remaining forces scattered, unable to hold their ground against humanity's relentless assault. "We've done it," Lieutenant Weaver said, her voice barely above a whisper. Briggs allowed himself a small, weary smile. "Not yet, but we've shown them one thing." He turned his gaze back to the fading remnants of the Zorith fleet, their ships limping back into the unknown corners of space. Humanity is no longer an underdog. The victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The Zorith, one of the most ancient and powerful species, had been forced to retreat by the human fleet. But this wasn't just a military victory, it was a statement. Humanity had proven its mettle, showing that not only could they hold their own against the galaxy's most fearsome adversaries, but they could outsmart them. The message was clear: we are here to stay, and we are here to conquer. But Commander Raylan Briggs knew this victory was just another step in a long journey. The galaxy was vast, filled with endless challenges. New enemies would rise, old alliances would shift, but humanity would face it all, undaunted. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, and humanity was just getting started. Months passed, and the galaxy's perception of humanity shifted drastically. The victory over the Zorith had sent a clear signal that no species, no matter how ancient or powerful, could stand against the relentless drive of humanity. But as the dust from the battle settled, the political and military repercussions of such a decisive victory began to unfold. Back at Human Central Command on Earth, the top officials were reviewing the aftermath of the battle. The High Command Center was a sleek, modern facility deep underground, far from the prying eyes of the world above. Inside, Commander Raylan Briggs stood alongside Admiral Clark and fleet intelligence officers, analyzing the data from the conflict with the Zorith. "That was a near-perfect operation," Admiral Clark said, his tone reflective. "But it's not over. The galaxy is watching, and the Zorith are far from finished. They'll regroup. They always do." "We've sent a clear message," Briggs replied, pacing the room. "But that victory wasn't just about the Zorith. It's about making sure every species in this galaxy knows that humanity isn't to be underestimated. We've earned our place at the table, but we've also made enemies." "You're right," Clark agreed, "and that's why we need to think ahead. The Zorith are a formidable foe, but they're not the only challenge we'll face. There are factions out there, some smaller, some larger, that are quietly watching us. They may not have the strength of the Zorith, but they have resources, and they have alliances. And many of them won't take kindly to a species like humanity showing up and shaking the balance." Briggs stopped pacing, focusing on the map that displayed the galaxy's factions and alliances. "We've made a lot of powerful friends, but there are still those who would rather see us fail than rise. The Dralic will regroup, The Vathari might still be thinking about how they can undermine us. And then there's the matter of the TZ Karn. They've been quiet lately, but their resentment still runs deep. We'll handle them one step at a time, Weaver said, her voice calm but sharp. But we need to be cautious. The Zorith were an unexpected threat. The next move could come from anywhere. Briggs nodded. I agree. We've proven we can fight, but now we need to build our alliances, consolidate our power, and ensure that we're prepared for whatever comes next. A few days later, the USS Valor received a surprising transmission. It was from an unexpected source, the Vathari. The Vathari, a race known for their devious political maneuvering and mercenary tactics, had long been a thorn in the side of the galactic community. But now, they were reaching out to humanity. The message was simple, cryptic, and to the point: we seek an audience. Your power has caught our attention. Perhaps we could make an arrangement. Briggs stared at the transmission. The Vathari were not a race known for making alliances, and their reputation for betrayal was legendary. But their presence in the galaxy was undeniable. A Vathari alliance could shift the balance of power dramatically, but there was always the risk that they were playing some deeper game. Admiral, what do you think? Briggs asked. We don't trust them, Clark replied without hesitation. But they've played the game long enough to know that their survival depends on their ability to align with the winners. The Zorith are too powerful for them to ignore. A Vathari alliance could give us an edge, but I'd say we need to keep them at arm's length. Briggs considered the options. The Vathari were unpredictable, but in this galaxy, sometimes unpredictability could be a useful tool. We'll meet them on neutral ground. Let them think they hold the cards. We'll see what they offer, and we'll decide from there. The meeting was set. The USS Valor was deployed to a neutral station just outside the border of Vathari space, a place where both sides could meet without the risk of outright conflict. A small, but heavily guarded spaceport, located in the shadows of a gas giant, was chosen. The station was a relic of older galactic dealings, a place where many power brokers, both legal and illicit, had come to negotiate over the years. As Briggs and a small contingent of high-ranking officers arrived, the Vathari delegation awaited them. The Vathari were a strange sight, tall, with elongated limbs and eyes that seemed to flicker in and out of focus. Their ships were sleek, their technology advanced, but their motives were always shrouded in mystery. The Vathari leader, a figure known only as Kavros, was waiting when Briggs and his team entered the meeting room. Kavros' alien form exuded an air of aloof authority, but there was something almost comforting in his cold demeanor, like a predator waiting to see how its prey would react. Commander Briggs, Kavros began, his voice smooth, almost too perfect. You've made quite the impact. We've been watching your rise with interest. Briggs remained standing, his expression unreadable. I'm sure you have. And what is it you're offering, Kavros? The Vathari leader tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human. Power is a valuable currency in this galaxy, Commander. The Zorith's defeat was impressive. Yes, but their retreat was only temporary, and I'm sure you're aware that their departure won't mean the end of our problems. The galaxy is a vast place, and its inhabitants are not as predictable as you might like. Briggs didn't flinch. We don't need your advice, Kavros. What we need is an understanding. You offer us power. What do you gain from this? Kavros smiled, a cold, calculating expression. Survival, Commander. The Vathari have learned, perhaps better than most, that power is not something one holds forever. It is fleeting, like the stars themselves. Alliances must be forged, not just for dominance, but for stability. And for stability, you need power on your side. Briggs narrowed his eyes. You're not here to help us. You're here because you see us as a way to tip the balance in your favor. Precisely, Kavros said without hesitation. You've proved your strength, but the galaxy is still a dangerous place. With the right alliance, the Vathari can ensure that humanity's rise is unchallenged. Briggs took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. We don't need allies who are looking to use us. If you want a deal, it has to be one of mutual benefit, not just survival for one side. Kavros studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he spoke again. We can agree on that, but be warned, Commander. There are forces at play in this galaxy far beyond what you faced. You may have conquered the Zorith, but there are others who will not be so easily deterred. The tension in the room thickened. It was clear the Vathari weren't just offering an alliance, they were warning humanity of a greater threat on the horizon. The meeting ended without a definitive resolution, but the seeds had been planted. The Vathari would play their part, but at what cost? Humanity was becoming a power, but the galaxy was full of unknowns, and with each victory came new challenges. As the USS Valor departed, Commander Briggs couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The stakes were higher than ever. The Vathari's words echoed in his mind, the warning of deeper, darker forces lurking just beyond the horizon. Humanity had conquered the Zorith, but the true test had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, and the road ahead would be fraught with dangers, but humanity would face it all, undaunted, ready for whatever came next. For in the heart of space, only the strongest survived. And humanity was determined to be the strongest.